I'm Milo Denison.
And I'm Kev Bamboo, and this is Rip It Up.
On each episode, we ask the questions that are impacting creatives around the world today.
And today we're joined by Juanita Rea, and we're talking about the topic of cancelling Dr. Seuss.
Well, thanks for joining us, Juanita. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for having me.
First, we'll just start with tell us a little about yourself.
Okay, I am joining you from Belfast. I am from South Africa. I spent 20 years being a school teacher in different places around the world. And alongside that, I've been an artist, a reluctant one, I think, as in not reluctant in terms of creating art, but with calling myself an artist and sharing art. And yeah, so I love trees. I'll stop there.
Okay. So is it the love of trees that, got you interested in art and the creating, drawings of trees, what type of art?
Well, my first love has been visual art. Mm-hmm. And although I did spend time in the garden as a child drawing plants and stuff, I wouldn't say that it was trees that got me. But, now that you asked it in that way, something does come to mind. So I think I first fell in love with visual art and painting and drawing in particular when I first saw the creation of Adam in a fold-out book by Michelangelo, and I opened it up and could feel the electricity between their fingertips and knew I wanted to go there. And also, it got me into painting and drawing. And I think the connection to trees is probably because I'm a nature person and very much in the outdoors. It's, in a way, I suppose, feeling the energy of life and expressing it.
Yeah. Is most of your art then of nature?
No, it isn't. I tend to take a plethora of nature photographs. That happens a lot, and videos, which I then sometimes do stuff with. But most of my writing and visual art is more to do with. It depends. It ranges from abstract in art stuff that I've experienced through meditation and want to express, I guess. And then there's a lot. I've recently worked on a lot of self-portraits, and I think more recently my focus has been on self-image, and it's directly stepping into my discomfort zones because, so I've been writing about and painting topics that I found difficult to address before. Yeah. So a lot of self-image, sexuality, mental health, and trees.
Cheese?
No, trees.
Oh, trees. Okay.
I thought you said cheese for a minute.
Wow, you draw cheese. Is it the square cheese or the circular cheese? Cheese with holes.
It's the new still life alternative. Do you feel that then with parts of that brings in a kind of an element of like artist activism in a way, in some senses, with the topics that you kind of cover?
Yes, very much so. So for me, I know that I've recently stepped into the space of accepting myself as an artist. Sorry, see, I'm cracking up.
It's that new thing, isn't it? It's like Milo still calls himself an actor, but I call myself a photographer.
But not that I am one, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I'm with you.
It can be difficult when people do, those early stages when somebody says, what do you do? Not because you're not proud of it or not because you don't enjoy doing it. It's just, I don't know. Sometimes it's perceived slightly differently. And I don't know why, really. It shouldn't be, but it's that personal.
No, I think, and I've been a teacher. So I've worked with children for 20 years, and I've worked I started up a social enterprise, and I've been that person saying, yes, you are, and you can do it. So it's like, I've been it. I know I've been it because I've done it. It's just accepting it, which is different. It's different. And
Sure.
So the artist activism for me is accepting and embracing myself as a survivor of childhood sexual trauma, and unshaming, unsilencing as a way to, through my writing, through my visual art, through songs, whatever it is, whatever the medium is, as a way to focus on a topic that is really difficult to talk about. So, and through that, I found that it has opened up doors for other people. I've recently been sharing things, and people have got in touch with me, and it's basically saying, you said what I felt, or you said what I feel, and I'm stepping more into that work of merging my education background and my work as a mindfulness and yoga facilitator to create spaces for people to explore art, whatever the medium is, it doesn't matter, yet it's a way to be with ourselves.
Yeah, that seems like a great way of processing, the things that you want to talk about that are really important to you. And, talking of difficult kind of questions, we're going to kind of go on to the first part of our survey and the questioning that comes about with this whole Dr. Seuss title and the topic that we're going to discuss today. So, yeah, we really, we always put this out each week, each fortnight or whatever, and we pose a few questions to the public to get a little bit of their perceptions. And this topic, of course, obviously is surrounding the recent kind of cancellation or removal of 6 Dr. Seuss titles. So we started with a really easy kind of question, or you may say, we always say an easy question. It's one of those that ends up, opening up a little bit further. So we just went with a pretty simple, do you agree with the cancellation or removal of 6 Dr. Seuss titles? And the public kind of perception on that was mainly, we got about 70% of people said no. This is in the initial outset. And then about 30% of people said yes. They were the only 2 options actually that was given to them, because I really wanted to kind of split them at that opening point just to see what their kind of line was. No fencing, just get in there and say, right, what do you think? So a few of the initial replies to that was, I generally don't agree with the cancel of anything. That's all that they put. And then another person put, yes, but it's not cancel culture. No one cancelled the books. There wasn't a Twitter mob frothing at the mouth about these books, but the company that holds a license to the books decided to not print or sell any of the problematic books. They are fully within their rights to not do this. So I'm going to kind of ping that one back, and I'm going to go to Juanita first, and what your initial thoughts are on that pretty, like I say, divisive opening question, which was, do you agree with the cancellation or removal of 6 Dr. Seuss titles? So
I'm going to approach this with from 2 angles. One as an artist, and the other as a person who's worked in schools and with children and have read the books. So from an artist's perspective, I know for myself that there's certain there's a book that I actually created 20 years ago. I wrote a children's story and I illustrated it. And when I went back to it and I started to share it, reading it at school, there are certain elements that I changed when I read the story. When I created it, it was a creation story. And there's something in there about God created the world. When I read the story at school, I changed it. Nobody said to me that I wasn't allowed to read that story. I changed it based on who I was reading it to. I changed it looking at my audience, knowing that, okay, I want my audience to engage with the story. And from the point that I had written it to the point that I was now a teacher in all these different schools, my worldview had changed. And my view on, my own spiritual practice changed. It's my own. I'm not going to share it with children I'm working with. All right.
So did you feel that did you feel that you personally had to make those revisions and those adaptations to like you say, to include more children, as it were?
Yes. I basically changed it in such a way that it was more secular, that the language in it became more relatable to more children, and didn't exclude any of the children that I was working with. Nobody said to me that I had to do that. I mean, geez, I could take in any story and read it, even really bad ones, but it was my own decision, even though it was, and especially because it was something I had created. I felt that I had a greater responsibility to do it. And again, thinking of all sorts of things, whenever I was chatting to a friend yesterday who actually got me into the spoken word open mic world. And we were talking about how, sometimes we'd read something and then after feeling how that flowed through the, just through sharing it and being there with an audience, we both realize that we do very similar things, that we go back and we change things. Not because the audience said that didn't work and I didn't like that. It's just something jarred, and that comes from the interaction. That comes from it being in the world. So now taking that to the books and the decision to pull those titles, that's a decision made by those who are taking responsibility for it. When I saw it, my first response to that was, I didn't see it as cancel culture. I saw it as them seeing where we are in the world, where the world was when those books came out, and where we are in the world now, and the responsibility to all the children, especially children who are the least heard. And so I felt, okay, I'm okay with that.
Sorry. So I'm going to play devil's advocate here just a little bit on the subject. So when you did your book, you made changes based upon where you were at the time. You read it to an audience based on that reaction. You make the changes, but it's your book to make changes too. So Dr. Seuss is deceased, and it wasn't Dr. Seuss making changes to the book based upon reactions. It was, and it wasn't making changes to the book. It was literally saying nobody can ever read this book again unless they already have a copy of this. So it's a kind of a little different situation. This takes me to I'm trying to think of Huckleberry Finn. So a few years back, they went to change Huckleberry Finn, the text of Huckleberry Finn, because it uses the N-word quite often, which was a common word when it was written, and it's relevant to the story. And so some schools and stuff, pulled it completely from the shelves, so kids couldn't read Huckleberry Finn. And a group basically said, well, let's just rewrite Huckleberry Finn and take out anything that might be offensive. But then it's a different story. And so I guess that's other people making a decision about a book that's not theirs. So it's kind of a comparison, because if I'm changing stuff I wrote, yeah, it's me making the change. But this is other people saying, I'm dead. And now people generations from now are changing what I wrote.
Yeah. And I think that it's still a step in the right direction, meaning it can allow a discussion to be had. It's not to say that those books vanish, because they don't. They exist. And maybe it's an opportunity to talk about what are those elements in the book, and for children to respond to them directly. I'm not working as a school teacher right now. I don't have a group of children I could walk into and pick up a book and ask them to read it and ask them, how do you feel? Yeah. How do you feel about that one? I'm talking about those 6 titles, right? And I think that would be a good place to be with it, because it's a discussion and we have to talk about it. And it's all about, finding out what each, in each person's mind, in each child's story, how the language makes them feel, and if there was anything about it that they'd want to change. So the artist creates what the artist creates. We respond. That's always going to happen, and there are always going to be things that we feel connected to or we don't feel connected to.
Yeah, I think I'll just quickly chime in. I think that, it is. I definitely think it's important in terms of, for educators, as it were, to kind of have those titles, for that reason. They probably shouldn't be removed in that sense or cancelled or whatever, because I can't remember all of the titles, but I think obviously, the Doctor's Use ones, I think it was If I Ran to the Zoo, McElligot's Pool, and to think I saw it on Mulberry Street, I think. Trying to think of the other.
Beyond Zebra. Yeah, I've got them here. So that's the only reason why I know them, is that they're right in front of me. Beyond Zebra, Scrambled Egg Super, and The Cat's Quizzer.
Yeah, and that hit the whole 6. Thank you, Milo. And yeah, I think from an educational point of view, that when it comes to any literature, in the sense, is that when we're learning and maybe kind of, looking at what we can change or have our thoughts, people still need access to that material in terms of being able to have a conversation, just like us 3 are today. Regardless of the level of education, that should be, definitely accessible. So probably it talks more about where we're looking at, where does it lead to if we start removing stuff. Yes, thankfully we do still live in a society where, an educator can get hold of, copies of certain books that are no longer maybe in the public domain, but that could become more increasingly difficult. So while those conversations can still be had, I think that those pieces of literature are still important to be able to actually be read as well. It's that kind of whole burning books kind of thing, in essence, if we're taking that away. So sorry, yeah.
So what came to my mind was a lesson that I was doing with year 5 learners on, essentially it was fake news, right? And so what did we do?
So what age group would that be? Year 5
9 and 10.
10?
9 and 10. So fake news. And at the time, we simply got a Trump tweet.
Oh, no.
It's hard to say. And the reason why we did it is because the children know and they are talking about it, right? It's stuff that's already there. It's on the radar. So let's have a conversation about it. Let's have a discussion about it. Let's look at it, right? And so why it came to mind is because that's, there were things essentially not okay about the tweet, right? But it was not.
I can't for a minute imagine why.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
And of course, we had to get one that was suitable, right? Obviously, but it was great. It was great because it was relevant, right? And when stuff is happening in the world, children are talking about it. And if we're not having the conversations with them, what are we saying? Yeah, what are we saying? So I thought that, well, it came to mind because you said, teachers have access to all these all the books and even the ones that have stuff in it that's not 2021, right? And there's loads. Come on, there's loads. There's tons. There's zillions. I was reading something recently, which I think is a fabulous book called The Art of Loving. I have it right here. The Art of Loving by Eric Fromm. And it's beautiful. And he was definitely homophobic. Does it mean that the entire book is, trashed? Of course not. It's context.
But is that book still being published?
I think so.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and that definitely opens up, like you say, the debate of why we're talking about this today, and various, obviously, other kind of works of literature as well. I'm going to kind of move on to the second question, because obviously that opening one was just a pretty kind of divisive one, and we know that the topic is going to be divisive for very many different reasons. So the next question that we had on our public response survey was, so we asked them, you may have grown up reading or watching some of those shows, the Dr. Seuss shows, with these stories included. So we asked them, thinking about how social attitudes have moved on and changed, what would their reaction be today on seeing these inaccurate racial stereotypes? So again, this was a bit more of a wider multiple choice. So we weren't opening them up to kind of have their own free comments at this point. We were kind of reining them in. And so the answers that were posed to them that they could choose from was, I would be pretty upset and shocked to see these things published today. Okay. I would be upset, but I would need to explore why they might still be being published. I'm not sure. It doesn't impact me or anyone I know. I would be okay with this if I found out further reasoning and importance behind it. And then finally, it was, I would be totally fine with this. It's just a book. I don't see what all the fuss is about. So I had to give them like a wide-ish kind of, opinion scale there, as it were. And most people in the survey, so 65% it was, yep, were straight in with I would be pretty upset and shocked to see these things published today. So obviously we're talking.
Sorry, can you say that percentage again? Was it six? Did you say 65?
Yeah, 65. Yeah, so
okay.
Well, two thirds ish. Yeah, just under 65. And that was, so 65 said I'd be pretty upset and shocked to see these things published today from the outset. I think they probably mean from more kind of like new literature, as it were. Something was
that's the way I would interpret that. If Dr. Seuss were alive today and publishing these books
and then was
today,
like,
fresh,
right, I'm going to write this. Yeah, there's that kind of it. There would seem to me as well that would be more of an intent to kind of working to spread hate, even if it was in a subtle way. Like how propaganda and things like that kind of come into the equation. And then no one from this survey said that they would want to explore why they might still be being published. No one said that they weren't sure or it doesn't impact them or anyone they know. So I think that's pretty sensible. I think everyone knows someone that may well be, impacted by not just those books, but other works as well. But we did have kind of the rest was, so no one put, I would be totally fine with this, which I think I put that in. That was my kind of like devil's advocate one, just to say, I don't know what the fuss is all about, because I think, as I just said, it does affect or impact most of us in some way. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. So the rest of it was made up from I would be okay with this if I found out further reason and importance behind it. So they were kind of open to the idea that they would be okay if they were produced today, but they would want to find out, they'd want more information. Obviously, later findings would make them possibly branch off onto another opinion.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Obviously, he was writing for the time, and now if something like that were being written, I think it would make sense that people would be offended by it, and I think it would be justifiably so. The flip side of that, I do see why somebody might, for the purpose of, especially nowadays, people are so kind of, being from the US, obviously, you have certain groups over there that are very into stoking arguments and creating conflict. So I potentially could see certain people over there creating stuff like this for the purpose of creating conflict. But that would be a specific purpose, very different than I see Dr. Seuss's intent, which is to, entertain kids with funny stories kind of stuff. So Yeah. I'm glad to hear that most people were reasonable in their response at 64%.
I'm going to just quickly chime in there because I think you referencing about kind of obviously Dr. Seuss no longer being around, and about the kind of then people purposely kind of creating this kind of atmosphere of cancelling, or, it's like the reverse intent. Someone may have wrote something to do something bad, or may have not even had that intent, but then there's a group of people that will come in, these kind of cancel culture style people that, regardless of the content, doesn't matter what. I think I've spoken about it before, saying, you could say that you don't like, just something trivial, and then a whole group of people will decide that we're going to kind of get that person in trouble. And I was reading something recently, I think it was the other month, there was the editor of Teen Vogue, and this is a great example of kind of the cancel culture thing, which brings in, so the new and now no longer editor of Teen Vogue was kind of, put in place just over a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, and they're 27. But 10 years ago, they wrongfully, naively, or whatever, they wrote a load of anti-Asian and homophobic tweets. And so when they were younger, 17, I think it was, they put these kind of tweets out there. And then later on, obviously, in between that time period, this person's obviously clearly grown and been less impressionable from others, or is not trying to be as impressionable to others. Gets a role, obviously, has been a journalist for several years, gets a role at Teen Vogue as the editor-in-chief. And then I think 20 or 20 plus employees there kind of are like, no, we're not having this. And then another journo then starts digging up tweets that obviously she made when she was not even an adult. Obviously she was responsible for what she wrote. I think she even kind of had apologized even shortly after the time she wrote them, apologized then recently as well. But I think that's one of the points where we kind of, this person then lost their job because of something that they wrote 10 years ago, when they hadn't really even developed as an adult, in their thoughts and minds, and that throwaway culture of, I'm not saying that what they wrote at the time was right at all, but is it right that the person lost their job for something when they weren't necessarily probably, they may not have been in the right place or whatever? And it's a good example because it's kind of especially of cancel culture, because it brings out that thing of cancel culture doesn't allow people to apologize properly. And I think that's one of the main points, is no one's getting a chance to kind of say, I can learn from this. I buggered up, I've messed up big time, but I'm going to grow from this and learn from this and develop and be a better person in the long run. If that person doesn't, yeah, sure. I mean, of course, if they keep making the same kind of ill-judged mistakes and they're not going to be willing to, they're totally kind of ignorant to anything, then I think it's a really difficult one, because of course that the tweets that person wrote years ago definitely offended people at the time. But I don't think they even were anyone of any public stature or whatever you want to call it. Not that matters, because we shouldn't be promoting those kind of attitudes regardless. Like say in our classrooms, young kids will read them and think that that's right. So that's totally wrong. But I think we've got to have the context of, if someone can be, sincere and apologize about something and grow from it, surely, is that taking that, the cancel culture element there, is that taking that to the extreme where someone loses their job, even though the company that she did, that employed her, they actually, they had that conversation with her in the interviews. They knew, they were aware of those, that previous history, a bit like somebody having a criminal conviction, for example. They've wronged in the past, but they're admitting that in their interview, and then they're saying, okay, yeah, we understand that. Let's go forward. That was like my little bit in there, just to note on kind of cancel culture, because there are examples out there that kind of do seem to be going a little bit too, I would say, are going a little bit too far. But I can see the reasons why Alexia Nakamand, that was Teen Vogue's, was the editor for, I think, 13 days before she actually resigned and said, I'm going to obviously there was pressure to resign, but she resigned. She wasn't actually sacked, but she had done work during that time in the years after she was, young and naive or whatever. She had actually done a lot of work kind of in support of minorities, because she's from a so-called minority herself. She's got a black background. So yeah, very naive to do the tweets at the time, but I thought I'd just put that one in because I think that kind of, it gives a little context to the cancel culture. It's not quite on the Dr. Seuss part, but it's definitely linked to the wider impacts that it has on society and especially social media. So yeah, I'll pass on to you, Juanita, for that one.
I have so many thoughts, but I want to zoom out to where are we in the world? Where are we in the world? I come from South Africa. I grew up in apartheid. Right? My first job, I was part of the non-white quota. I know that I was. I mean, the first Democratic election was in 1994. That was when I finished high school. The university I went to, I was the second intake of non-white students. The first school that employed me. Whether I was a good enough teacher, well, it turns out that I was, but they had to. It was their responsibility in that transition to be employing non-white teachers because our world was changing. That's where we were in the world. In my second year of teaching, I had a friend who, she was my colleague. We taught together and we were on a school trip. And I remember sitting, it was an evening. It was a beautiful African evening. Oh my gosh. And we were sitting outside. I think it was really late and probably the children had fallen asleep, but not really. But anyway, we were having a quiet moment outside. I mean, it's a school trip, right? And I remember her saying to me, when I was a child, when I was the age of these children that we are with right now, I would go on camps where we were told that we were superior because we were white and because we were Afrikaans. We were superior. And when I think back to what I was told then and who I know of you, what I know about you, this person sitting with me now, everything I was told then was a lie. She didn't have to tell me that. She didn't have to tell me that she'd been, programmed to be racist, but it was her own realization. And what I felt when I look back on those years, and there were lots of incidents. Oh my gosh, there were so many incidents of absolute blatant racism. Utter, complete. It was 2000. It was early days. Our country was changing. The world, our world was changing. Right now, why am I saying this? Because we may have come a long way and we haven't. We haven't. The reality is the majority of the world's voice isn't heard. The majority of the world's voice is misrepresented most of the time. The literature, most of the literature out there, and I have used literature to teach children how to read and write in various countries around the world. Most of it is not representative of the children's faces themselves, right? Now, why am I saying this? I'm saying that, yeah, there are so many dangers to categorizing a person at a certain point in their lives and making them, a green triangle, and that's all they're ever going to be. But people change, right? People can become blue circles, and multicolored diamonds. And I know from having lived through apartheid and having lived through the transition, been in the face of total racism, that it takes time for people to recognize that they themselves, that we ourselves have been racist in different ways, right? And And when the language and when the images, when the programming is so subtle and it's so pervasive, it's hard to listen to your own sense of humanity and decide for yourself, what do I think and what do I feel? And I appreciate my friend who sat there that night and told me that, because she was telling me what she felt. It had nothing to do with what she'd been told. So I think that where we are in the world is crucial. And if anything, when I watched Black Lives Matter erupting, it was heartbreaking on many, many levels, knowing that, I was in South Africa at the time, and knowing that although we've come so far in South Africa, there is still so much of that happens.
Well, I guess, can I interject? I'm going to take what both of you said here and kind of create a bit of a hypothetical situation. So your friend, let's say your friend had Twitter when she was a kid, right? Like kids nowadays do. And at the time when she was a kid, she was taught these racist things. So she then posted them on Twitter. She then grows up, meets you, and realizes, oh shit, I was being taught racist things. I'm not that person anymore. I've now become a better person, and then goes out and does her job. But then what happens, and this is what I think where a lot of this cancel culture has gone awry, is your friend could be doing a job now, and those tweets that she did when she was a kid, completely ignorant of anything, will then come back to haunt her. And I know even with Dr. Seuss, a lot of people are saying, well, they canceled the books, not hashtag cancel culture. But I would say if that wasn't a thing going on right now, the books might not have been canceled. And in both of your scenarios where people say something, or not your friend because she didn't have Twitter, but where people are being canceled for something they say when they're younger, it's that exact same scenario. So we have a long way to go to what you're saying, but I actually feel like in a lot of ways we're taking a bit of a step backwards because of social media and this kind of stuff.
Well, I think that's the other big element in all of this. And that, so, I mean, when I look at it, I don't see it as Dr. Seuss being canceled at all. She said, how many books are there? Right? Yeah, exactly. And for me, it's okay. There are some that at the time that they were written, like the book that I showed you, this person who wrote it, I don't know, maybe early 19th century. It's just, and this is and that's why I brought up the example of my friend. It's context. It's context. And if my world is this big, and in my world, this is what I'm told, that's all I know. And only until I have, this happens or that happens and that happens, and there's other people in my world, and I start to see, oh, actually, my world is not what I thought it was, right? And we all need that. Gosh, we're human beings. That's just how we are, and that's we make mistakes and we grow from that. So I don't see what's happening with these books as cancel culture with Dr. Seuss at all. I think it's an opportunity. It's a learning moment, and it's an opportunity for teachers to pick up the books and have a discussion and ask children what they think about these things. Because how else do we find out what our views are? And sometimes our views can be wrong. Sometimes our views can be biased. Sometimes they can be, this big, because that's all we know, right? So, I mean, I think it's a great opportunity to have those discussions. I think for me, having racism exists in the world, right? It exists, and is something that we have to respond to. And it is our responsibility to do so. And so I feel that when these moments are there to respond, to have the discussions, to make the changes, that's the side that I'm going to choose.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's definitely a moment to, it's definitely an opportunity to start listening to people, especially for people like, myself and Milo. We will be the first to admit that we're incredibly, even though we may not even realize it at times, we're incredibly privileged just by, being white males, So when it comes to an opportunity to learn, and more importantly, I think listening to people is this kind of moment is when that conversation goes down a certain route. That's certainly a moment to actually listen to people, rather than we always can natter to each other all day long about chips or sausages or whatever. But,
or tea.
It's important to listen to the
tea, exactly, yeah.
Or tea, yeah. But it's definitely important to for us to take that moment and actually listen to people that matter. Yeah.
Well, speaking of listening, how about Juanita entertains us with her first performance
what is that
piece?
sound effect?
That's
was
me.
That a dramatic?
Yeah, dramatic pause there as I speak with my hands and smack my microphone stand. Yes.
you're now adding in live effects,
live sound effects, real time, audience, real time.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So wait. You distracted me. So what?
I was saying, let's hear one of your pieces. Let's
okay.
Let's
sure.
Go into your first performance piece.
Okay, so this is something it's a multimedia piece. It's something that I created about 10 years ago. It's video footage and poetry and some music elements. And the video itself was put together by a friend of mine. And when he made the video and he put it on YouTube, I said to him, take it down. Just take it down. I don't want to look at that. And he says, what? He was like, why? I was so self-conscious. So the reason why I'm telling you a little bit about it is because I recently started to embrace all this stuff I make. Yes, so let me show it to you. As I walk through this world just once, let me not stand accused of dishonesty. Let me harness my fear of displeasing others and say no to the lies that displease me, the lies that deny humanity and compassion, lies that deny simple truths. As I walk through this world just once, let me not watch beauty pass me by and stand cold and unresponsive to her touch. Let me feel her gentle tremble and her tremulous might and say, yes, I feel you stirring my bones, warming my blood, halting my breath as I behold beauty. As I walk through this world just once, let me not watch truth pass me by and stand steadfast, with eyes shut tight, afraid to look at her. Let me take hold of my cowardice like a good friend who sees my fears and does not judge, yet tells me with kindness to wise up, my friend, and speak against injustice and wrongdoing with kindness and care. As I walk through this world just once, let me not watch love pass me by and stand back in doubt and speculation of her presence. Let me feel her in the ache of my skin and in the catch of my breath as I fall in love with love and with the joy and the sorrow that only broken hearts know, and only broken hearts trust. As I walk through this world just once, let me not watch this perfect moment pass me by. Let me see it. Let me walk it. Let me breathe it. Let me touch it. Let me write it. Let me sing it. Let me not watch this perfect moment pass me by. Let me be with it.
That was beautiful. That was it was really nice. I mean, it's very like sensual and very like very nice. I'm gonna go steal it and recite it to my girlfriend, and she'll be like, "Ooh."
You just like, yeah, that's a spin on it.
point score, trying to point score there. You know?
Yeah. She'll be so impressed.
Aww.
Yeah, it was.
No, it was really great. That was really great. I really enjoyed it.
Very impactful. That was actually.
Thank you.
And it was nice. Like the combination works really well too. The poetry, the music, the sound of, the visuals and stuff. So the mixed media was really nice.
So how did you come to kind of get that piece together? I know you said about your friend kind of popped it on YouTube for you, but how did it all come together initially?
How did it come together? I told you I love rain, right? Yeah, see, I told you. So I was.
It's all coming back around now.
That's what we like. We like to come back and go, reference.
I was in Johannesburg. I think I was teaching meditation during that time, and it was a beautiful rainy day, and I was utterly enamored and just stood there videoing the rain. The poem I'd written somewhere else at another time. I think the poem was written, probably even much earlier than that. The video was 10 years ago. The poem maybe 15 years ago. And the song, the singing, that was in the Philippines. So, and the poem was written in South Africa, I think, maybe when I was in my 20s. I can't remember. See, this is me. I am always creating something, and it's just stuff that happens, and I don't necessarily put it out into the world. The video came about, Kev, because my lovely friend had access to these files. We worked together, and he had all these files on the laptop, and he just made this video and he showed it to me, and I was just, what'd you do that for? He said, but it's because I just put it together. I'm like, yeah, but I don't want people to see it.
I'm totally thankful for your friend then, because, like we just said, that was great.
Absolutely. It is, I would highly recommend putting that into the world.
Yeah, I've become more comfortable these days with my art, and so yes, he was I don't know, maybe he wasn't that surprised when I messaged him a few months back and said, yeah, that video, could you put it back up?
Glad he saved it and didn't delete it.
So talking about more of your art, I think Milo's got another question for you, actually.
I do indeed. So on the subject of art, what has been your most impactful moment with your art and creativity so far?
Sorry, that was a big exhale.
Take as long a breath.
Yeah, exactly.
I think for me, the most impactful, there are a couple of things. Essentially, sharing it and performing it, which I've only started to do in the past few months. And I guess the responses of people, especially with some of the more difficult topics and darker topics, and that by me being brave enough to be terrified and just put it out, that it encourages other people. I've made a few new friends over the past few months, all artists, and some of them are mentors, some of them I'm starting to do stuff with, and all of us are survivors of sexual trauma. And I think that for me, I guess the most positive, the proudest, most impactful is I think it's not a specific thing. It's more the place that I'm in now. Yeah, I think that's more it. I'm proud to be here. It's taken me a long time, and yeah, and I feel that in this short period of time, because it's only been a few months, and I have a song that's coming out on an album with the music charity here. I had some artwork in online exhibitions and poems accepted in magazines, and I of course I'm proud of those things. Yet I've been terrified. I've been so terrified to be seen and be heard for most of my life. Creating art is breathing. That's just, it happens. I don't have any control over it. It happens in all sorts of ways. But being in this place of sharing it, I'm proud to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's great that you're finding that you've got a bunch of people that are relating to your work, because I think anyone that produces anything, regardless of the medium, they're always putting something out there that, like you say, that kind of initial impact is that you want people to not necessarily like it, but you want them to relate to it and have some kind of feedback from that. So finding, like you say, a group of people that actually can relate to it in a very similar way is probably, I'm not going to assume it, but I would say that it is probably a massively positive thing for yourself.
It is. And I want to add something there, that there are other people who I've met through being in Belfast, who want to work with me to facilitate healing through the art programs for others. And they themselves aren't necessarily survivors of sexual trauma. They are people who have seen my art and feel that there's a value in it in terms of, I guess, being catalysts or examples for others to approach their own difficulties through various media. And that's a huge thing for me as well, because we want to, like you said, Kev, it's not necessarily, and I know this about my art, but some of it, that it's not necessarily that people are going to like it. But it will touch people, and I've been uncomfortable about that.
No, absolutely. It's not sharing things that are incredibly personal to yourself is never an easy thing when you're opening that up to, a wider audience, because you're exposing yourself, and I'm sure we've all not had to do that, but we've all done that with our own creative outputs at some point. We've kind of exposed ourselves to kind of help other people, or for the benefit of other people. So yeah, no, there's absolutely zero shame in what you've done. It's absolutely brilliant what you're doing. I think if anything, it should be, it's very, very honourable. Actually, I don't think anyone could say that it's a bad thing at all. It's great. I